Hello and welcome to the Brian Hornback Experience. This is episode 92, and I've got another candidate that is going to be on the August 4th, that's Thursday, August the 4th ballot. I'm starting to emphasize that now. And this is none other than Will Edwards. He's a candidate for Knox County School Board in the 4th District. How are you, Will?
Doing great, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. So, 4th District. Let's kind of talk about that. That's Sequoia Hills and where else?
Absolutely. So it runs Sequoia Hills, essentially down Kingston Pike, Westland, and North Shore, all the way out to Carl Cowan Park. So it covers southwest Knox County, if you will. Also inches over the interstate a little bit into the West Hills community, and West Hills Elementary is likewise included in District 4. So we're a heavy elementary school district. West High is our only high school located within the boundaries of the district. However, we have a number of high school students that attend Bearden High.
Right. So you've got, let's say, I think you've gone as far west as North Shore Elementary, and I think you've just picked up A.L. Lots Elementary into your district too, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Based on redistricting, we picked up all of Bluegrass and part of A.L. Lots. A portion of A.L. Lots is still included in District 5. Anything essentially north of Westland Drive is District 5, but south of Westland and largely east of Mississippi is included now in District 4.
Right. So this is a district that's been served the last 4 years by Virginia Babb. She decided not to seek re-election. She could have, because there's not, term limits don't apply to school board. But one thing that's changed in the last 4 years is you had to declare a party preference, and you are a Republican. And so you're right, you are the Republican nominee.
That's correct. I'm a lifelong Republican.
Right.
And a lot of people have a lot of angst about partisan races and school board races. This is something we've thought about doing for a long time if Virginia were to ever step down from her seat. And it just happens that it's a partisan race. So I didn't jump into the race because it's a partisan race, but I am indeed a Republican.
You jumped in because you were thinking about it. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but also because if Virginia had decided to run either as a Republican, as an independent, or whatever, then you probably would not have jumped in. Correct?
That's correct. Right. That's correct.
But now you've been active. You're a native Tennessean. You're married. You've got a couple of elementary school kids, but you've been active for a number of years. Let's see, you've got, well, first of all, you're president of the Ronald Mcdonald House, which is the house that was built years ago to kind of house the family members who have children, either primarily at Children's Hospital or in any other hospital. But you've been involved with the Autism Society of East Tennessee, but also you've co-chaired the Parent Advisory Council, which is a council that works with Knox County Schools. You're on the Education Committee of the Tennessee Council on the Autism Spectrum Disorder, and Governor Lee made you the East Tennessee rep on the Tennessee Council of Developmental Disabilities. So just kind of talk about, I guess, we just kind of take the Ronald McDonald thing out for a minute. But obviously you've been involved in a couple of different areas that involve developmental disabilities, but also I think it's really important to talk about your work as co-chair of the Parent Advisory Council, and kind of because I think that really lends, in my mind, as a former school board member, and as all three of my kids have went through the Knox County school system and graduated high school, but I think that in my mind that gives you a little more than just a dad that wants to get involved in schools. Obviously, you've been around, so you've got some experience in Knox County schools. So kind of talk about that.
Absolutely. So we're not new to education. I didn't jump into this race as my first endeavor into education. So I think looking at a body of work, I've been involved in education for a long time. I've been on there are a couple of parent advisory councils. I've been on one since I believe this is year number 5.
Wow.
Stepped away for purposes of the campaign. And I've been co-chair 3 or 4 years of that council. So being on there, you get a lot of feedback from both parents, but also administrators. And administrators bring to that that group, the input that they're receiving from teachers. So it's a good mix of issues that come before the council that we're trying to address to advance Knox County schools forward, obviously to help our students excel.
So now, with that parent advisory council, do y'all deal with if a parent has a problem that they've not been able to deal with at the school level? Do they bring those to the parent advisory council? Or are you clearly just working with central office and those type issues?
So there's actually two liaisons that are housed within central office that serve the purpose of taking parent issues and working between the parents and the school district. Those liaisons also work very heavily with the portion of the council that I was involved with. So we didn't actually take direct complaints, if you will, from parents, but nonetheless, those issues would oftentimes find their way into the council discussions on how do we address this. And a lot of the issues that we would address on the council, particularly related to students with disabilities, was communication issues. So how do we better communicate to parents what's going on in the district, what are the options that are available to them, and how can we better serve. So a district this size is always going to have a communications challenge.
Right.
And we as parents on that council had a particular focus on providing assistance to the administrators in making sure that we had a great communication plan to our parents. So there are various newsletters that go out that's part of that, and we had a lot of input into those items as well.
Does that council meet on a regular basis? I mean, do y'all meet like every quarter, every month, or I mean, is it just as needed?
Absolutely. So COVID kind of threw a little wrench.
Oh yeah, that's true.
There, but generally we were a monthly meet. We would
Oh wow.
Prior to COVID, we would meet either at lunchtime or at 4:30 or 5 o'clock to try to give as many parents the opportunity as they could to attend.
So, what do you? What do you kind of envision? I mean, obviously, we got a new superintendent, Dr. Reiswick, and so I mean that decision's been made. But what are you hearing out in the community? What are when Will Edwards is the school board member for District 4? What do you think some of the key things that you're going to be able to? What do you envision the issues being, and how to address those issues?
I think we'll have great momentum with a new superintendent, and I'm hopeful that I get the opportunity to work with him. Obviously, my campaign started well before he was selected to be our next superintendent and before he started earlier this month. But it just happens that my priorities largely are in line with his priorities and things he wants to accomplish as superintendent. So I was excited to hear that because I think change is often good, and the momentum and change that he will bring, I think, will be welcome to Knox County schools. A piece of that, though, is also let's bring the conversation back to student success and achievement. If we're not talking about student success and achievement, as a board, we're probably not accomplishing the purpose that we're set out to be. So there's a lot of noise on the political landscape, both locally, at the state level, and the national level. I don't really feel like that should bring its way into the boardroom or the schoolroom. So bringing the conversation back to how do we create successful students, or how do we set students up for success and achievement, should always be our focus. Now, there are a lot of things that are ancillary to that, but I want to help bring that conversation back. So as I look around at the candidates across the district, that's the folks that I want to work with, or the folks that are looking for student achievement to be top priority. So I've really got 4 priorities, Brian. One is focusing on, as you said earlier, I've got 2 young boys, so focusing on literacy, and particularly literacy rates at the end of 3rd grade. Second is preparing students for graduation, and what does life look like after they are no longer a student in Knox County schools, and that's going to look different for all of our students. Third is protecting parents' rights. You know, COVID has been very difficult on families and teachers alike, but one of the big barriers that's been created is we haven't had had as many parents in the schools. And as I walk across the district and knock on doors, I hear from parents, I used to be very involved and engaged in my school, and COVID put up this barrier, and it doesn't feel like that barrier has come down yet. So ensuring that we've got active, involved parents, and that looks different from school to school, district to district, community to community across Knox County, but making sure that we are opening that door for that to be able to occur to the extent possible. And then the fourth is supporting our teachers and staff. Obviously, it's been a very challenging time in our world, but I don't think they've felt supported over the last few years. Our support staff also goes into that conversation. So earlier I talked about literacy being a priority. Well, who's going to provide additional hands in the classroom to help the teachers? It's going to be the support staff. So we need to make sure that we're focusing on staff as well, supporting them, paying them appropriately, and making sure we're recruiting and retaining top talent here in Knox County.
Well, and it's kind of unfortunate for Virginia Bab and anybody else that that only served the last 4 years, because the community really, COVID kind of stopped everything, and then we started in all the political theater that COVID created, I remember the day that the news broke, I guess last September, that Bob Thomas was going to go ahead and retire. And that was the day that we were out in North Knox County breaking ground on, I don't know what they're going to call that new elementary school out there, but out there off Cowards Mill Road. And we broke ground, and then later that afternoon it breaks that Bob Thomas has informed the board that he's going to retire. And so, in that whole process, good for Bob, I guess, that, he's had a lifetime in Knox County, both as an educator and as a superintendent. But it really at that point, it kind of stopped the board from any real forward momentum. And again, this is all my opinion. Any real forward momentum. They basically had to, what are you going to do with a rubber duck? Not a rubber duck, a lame duck superintendent. At that point, the board had to move from okay, COVID is more or less over, to okay, now we got to find the next superintendent. So, all that. The one thing I learned in 4 years on the school board 20 years ago is that government operates very, very slowly. And so, we haven't even talked about the fact that, you're an attorney, which means you're a businessman, but you're also an attorney. So I guess you're kind of used to things not going, as fast as it should, right?
Sure.
But go ahead.
Yes, sure. So I think being a lawyer would have certainly been handy on the board over the last few years.
Oh, for sure.
Very few times in history that I think a lawyer could get elected to the school board, but this may be one of them. But also, I think it also helps me to have the perspective of being nimble and having the ability to change and deal with the next crisis. There's always going to be something down the pike that we need to prepare for, and that's what I do every day for my clients, is to prepare them for the next issue that might arise. So I think that's a very helpful background to have to serve on the board.
So obviously you being a lawyer and I think the last year or so, we had a lawsuit where the law department really didn't seem to have a firm grasp on what was going on, and that kind of drug out too. What's your thought? We're not nailing you down on anything, but do you think it's a good idea? Have you? Let me word it this way. Have you had any thought, or has it occurred to you that at some point there should be some discussion? I guess my problem is, over the last year, what we see is the law department is supposed to represent the county. So the county is one entity, the schools is another entity. Granted, the county or the county commission gives the money to the schools to operate the schools, but the school board gets to operate the schools, right? So it's interesting that the law department the way I understood it was created when we created the charter in 1990 was the law department is supposed to represent the county. But about 8-10 years ago, the law department kind of feels like they're the director, they're the lawyer for the people. Well, their client is the county and the county schools. So should there be a firewall between the school board and the county? And basically what I'm trying to get to is, should the school board be able to, in cases where they want their own counsel, should they be able to do that?
So let me answer that in a roundabout way, and then I'll come back and answer it directly. One of the challenges every lawyer has, in particular when they have a massive organization or a number of clients in the same case, is identifying who your client is. And what the law department, I believe, said is the people and the taxpayers of Knox County are who we represent. As a taxpayer, I'm glad to hear that, but as a potential member on a 9-member board who's relying on that person or that department as counsel, that gives me a lot of angst, because I don't have someone that I can go to and have the true attorney-client relationship that you would have in a private setting. So from that perspective, identifying who the actual client is, I think we need to wrestle with as a community on how we structure the law department. I'm indifferent on whether that's the law department or the school board has their own attorney, but it is important for any board that has fiduciary responsibilities to be able to have counsel that's on the same page as the client.
Well, yeah, and you know what's funny about that is, you know, I guess again, from my experience 20 years ago, and 20 years ago, they always kind of throw it up, you know. Anybody can go back and look at history and figure this out. I've never said this on a podcast, and I've never written it on brianhornback.com, but I was one of the board members when the school board sued the county commission. I've still got several large 3-ring binders that I could, if I chose, to get them out of the mothballs and go through them. And, you know, at some point I might do that. But interestingly enough, our attorney has since passed away. When I say our attorney, the school board's attorney has since passed away. But, you know, it's always comical for me hearing references to when the school board was suing the county commission, and I just have to laugh because I was one of those school board members. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I do think what's interesting, my roundabout point is, it is interesting that Bud Armstrong and now David Book, you know, they have done a commendable job, I guess I'll say, in the fact that they've kind of let Gary Dupler kind of move over to the AJ building, and now I guess at the TVA Towers. So I guess they're trying to have a firewall, but that firewall doesn't really exist when the law director decides to show up at a school board meeting and then get involved, you know. And I mean, you know, then you get that situation where Dupler has to do what his boss tells him to do. And so, you know, again, it's politics, it's government, it's never exactly like it's supposed to be, right?
Absolutely.
So, any other thoughts about what's going on in Knox County or your campaign? And I guess we'll, you know, if you've got a few more comments, and then we'll kind of wrap it up, and I'll tell everybody where they can find you on the internet and on Facebook.
Sure. So folks that are frequently asking me, what should we be looking for in a candidate? How do we make a selection in a school board race?
That's
It's not really out crafting legislation.
right.
So a couple of items there that I'm encouraging people to look at. One is go take a peek on social media and determine what those candidates are talking about. Are they talking about student success and achievement? Or are they talking about outside noise that's not going to be helpful to Knox County schools and serving on a 9-member board and working with others? So really do your research on who the candidates are. It's very easy to get a feel for what their priorities are by looking at what they're putting out on social media. Second is, as I mentioned earlier, we've got an opportunity for great momentum behind Dr. Riswick. looking for candidates whose priorities will align with what Dr. Ryswick hopes to accomplish as superintendent. I'm not looking for folks to be rubber stamped in any form or fashion. There has to be transparency and accountability. But it's important for us to be on the same page and to be rowing in the same direction towards student achievement and success. So looking at candidates, I think those are the two priority items that I'm encouraging folks to look at.
Well, and I think it's funny you mentioned social media. It just so happened, obviously the last 17 plus years I've been writing BrianHornback.com. The last couple of years I've been doing this podcast all in conjunction with one another. But over the weekend I happened to, I guess in preparation for this, I happened to be reading another online news publication, and they made reference to Sequoia Hills Elementary. And then I went to your opponent's website and saw that your opponent too had identified Sequoia as Sequoia Hills Elementary. But we have a good friend. Well, my wife has a good friend who was principal at Sequoia for a number of years. And so, on my social media over the weekend, I pointed out that there is no Sequoia Hills Elementary. Obviously for people like me, who is a pundit or whatever you want to call me, I can kind of do that. But I do think details, having served on the school board, details do matter. And if your own child is a student at Sequoia, which I know that your opponent, at least on her website, her child attends Sequoia Hills Elementary, and I'm not quite sure where Sequoia Hills Elementary is, but I won't drag you into that dogfight. But I think details do matter. Folks can find you on Facebook at Will Edwards for Education. That's WILLEDWARDS Education, EDUCATION. And then also your website that's got your bio is Edwards for Education, FOR, edwards4education.com. The election again is Thursday, August the 4th. It's a Thursday. The reason we do that, state law mandates that the state primary be on the first Thursday of August. Everybody, every 2 years, starts getting all riled up. Why are they moving it to Thursday? They've never not had it on the first Thursday in August, but normally with the county and with the federal, we do everything on the first Tuesday, but always, every 2 years, in August, folks, it's the first Thursday, August the 4th. Early voting is July 15th through the 30th. That means that early voting is starting on a Friday, July the 15th, and running through July 30th. So I'll let you appeal to all those folks out in District 4 to vote for Will Edwards, and then we'll be done with this podcast. And I appreciate you being on here, Will.
Great. Thanks for having me on, Brian. You're right. Early voting's just around the corner, Friday, July 15th. Early voting will kick off. So it's a hard election with respect to timing because folks are on vacation. School hasn't started back yet. But it's really important that we have a great turnout for our general election. If anything, over the last few years has shown us local elections matter. And this is our opportunity to follow up on what's happened over the last few years and make sure we're electing sound folks to our local positions. So I look forward to meeting other voters out on the campaign trail. Hope folks will reach out with any questions they have, but would love for folks to turn out and vote for Will Edwards starting July 15th for early voting.
All right. We'll talk to you then.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.